Will your next office be an oil rig? That's the title of this digital keynote we're holding here at the New Business Model Conference 2020.
And at first glance, this might not sound like a business model question, but our presentation will show you why it is a question not just about one business model, but indeed an ecosystem of business models.
My name is Jørgensen, and this is Lars Jakob Pedersen.
We are both affiliated with the Norwegian School of Economics, where we are co-heads of the Center for Sustainable Business, a research center that does research, teaching, and outreach on the behaviors, business models, and technologies that promote sustainable business. And today, Sveinung, we're going to talk about one of the large research projects we have at this center.
Yeah, we will. It's called RECOM, or New Circular Business Models, and as the title says, it's business models. It's models in plural.
And the starting point of this research project is the clash between two large industries with indeed large footprints. On the one hand, the oil and gas industry that we can look at if we look out the window here in Bergen, Norway, which is entering a new phase in its life, so to speak. On the one hand, this industry that has a lot of resources that need to be taken care of and put to good use. And on the other hand, Sveinung, the construction industry, the building and construction industry, which is famous for its large footprint.
So we have here two different industries with large footprints, and both with the need of rethinking their business models, and that's the core in this project. And we're not alone in this project. We have several partners who have come together to try to solve this complex problem.
And as we will show you, this is a collaboration between us as researchers, different companies in the oil and gas industry, in architecture and building. There's a financial institution involved. There are lawyers involved. So this is a large set of actors coming together to try to think about what this clash of industries might produce in terms of business model innovation. And while the project has been sort of starting up for a long time, it was officially launched only yesterday.
It was. You could tell about it here. It's from today's newspaper here in Bergen, and where this idea and this company behind it is launched, because this research project has manifested itself through a company called Nordic Circles.
And we will get back to Nordic Circles, but we will first show you a picture that in some sense illustrates the key problem, or one of the key problems behind this project. And this is a fitting image of an oil rig.
It is. And what are we supposed to do with them? They've been out there in the North Sea for a long time, and what kind of afterlife can we give them? This one was dragged then from Northern Europe down to south somewhere to be decommissioned, perhaps into spikes. Who knows? I mean, so there is already a reuse of the materials here, but as we see, it ended up in a graveyard at Shetland, and that's not where it should be. So how can we, through this project, then find a better afterlife for these oil rigs and also for the ship?
And rather than burying them literally or metaphorically, we need to give them new life. And there are many solutions right now for what to do with an old oil rig, or for that matter a ship. Some argue that we should simply sink them to the bottom of the ocean. That would be a very poor use of those resources. Others, like you say, Sveinung, think that we should beach them somewhere on the southern hemisphere, where typically poor people with very poor health, environmental, and safety conditions are picking them apart and eventually turning them into some low-quality product, perhaps a nail or a spike of some sort. But for anyone who has been on board one of these oil rigs, you will know that they are made of steel and concrete and other materials of the absolute highest value. And in a business model perspective, then, it should be possible to upcycle those resources into new materials.
So that's why we called it the RECOMX project. How can we go from a decommissioning into a recommissioning of these huge installations and find new usage for them?
And that's why we've taken part in this large project, both as researchers and, as Sveinung said, also as partners of the project in the Nordic Circles venture, which was started by a visionary architect called Fredrik Bart, who had been working for a long time with upcycling of simple building materials in his architectural ventures. But he looked out of his office at all of these oil rigs, and he wondered, might it not be possible to take these high quality installations and turn them into new office buildings, business parks, or, as in the picture shown on the right-hand side of this slide, perhaps things like aquariums, experiential centers, or what have you.
This is not easy to do in an architect office. He couldn't do it alone. And he has colleagues around the world, and he's inspired by colleagues in Denmark who's done this with tree, with glass, and with plastic and other resources. But he hadn't seen anything done with steel, and he wanted to reuse the steel, but he doesn't have a factory, you know. And he can't do all of this himself. So he needs finance, he needs thinkers, he needs doers, you know, and also he needs to build this whole ecosystem, moving them from pretty much linear value chain into a circular one.
And speaking of financing, this project was funded in part by a large foundation affiliated with the local bank Sparebanken Vest, a foundation called Agenda Vestlandet, that has been part of making this collaborative venture possible.
And it is an agenda. It's an agenda for the western coast of Norway, but also a Nordic agenda and a global agenda behind this initiative in the bank. They want to go in and build and remake the economy, turning it from the non-renewables and the downcycling to renewables and upcycling. So this is an important project for them, and they're absolutely partners in this, trying to figure out how to do this in practice.
And let's put this in context, in the sort of regional or national context of Norway here on the west coast. We know that in the next 10 years, there's going to be a lot of materials ending up on shore. I mean, 200,000 tons of steel, and all of these other materials we're looking at here as well. Some might look at that as a problem. Seen from a different angle, it's a business model opportunity.
And business model opportunities. I mean, because there are several opportunities here in new design, in new architecture, in building factories or using existing factories, decommissioning factories operations also here in Norway, and rethink this. How can we turn this into something valuable, something that lasts forever in its the highest value possible?
So let's think about this in the research context then. We're talking about here moving from a decommissioning to a recommissioning mindset. We know that upcycling is central to many circular business models, not all, but many of them involve some form of upcycling. And as many of you will be thinking, upcycling within a single industry is a comprehensive challenge on its own. And in other instances, when we're talking about upcycling across industries, it really involves a very comprehensive form of coordination and collaboration between very different kinds of actors, very different kinds of companies, not just along one value chain, but indeed along several different value chains in different industries. And what this project is really about then is it possible to upcycle high-value building materials from the oceans and turn them into high-quality materials or buildings on land? And what are the business models that might make this possible? We have some research aims.
Yes, we do. And they're not singular in a way. We have several research aims, and we're all about this ecosystem down to the business model, and then also into the behavior. What kind of behavior is needed from the decision makers in the different parts of this value chain? And here's the first one, Lars.
Yeah, and we will show you 3 such aims. This is the first one, and it comprises many sub-questions, but overall, we're going to try to understand and investigate this upcycling ecosystem from ocean to land and the chain of business models therein. And this finding is one way to illustrate that.
It's based on Lacey and also on the 2020 book, Accenture's handbook on circular business models. We just try to kind of draw the map here in a way, moving from these oil rigs down in the left all the way into building materials that can be shared perhaps as a service. But how then to connect all these dots? How to take these oil rigs and build the factories, do all the designing that is needed, design of business models, design of collaboration between them, the design of products, design of services, and put people into work to do this and transform the materials into parts that can be used in buildings. So these needs to be distributed. We need to find platforms if we're going to make this product as a service real, and then turn it into products and services that architects and entrepreneurs and the whole constructing industry will find interesting and valuable. So there's lots of different business models here that have to tick together. And today this is mostly a linear value chain. And to make this ecosystem will require lots of work.
So this is a multifaceted first research aim, which will have investigations of strategic questions, business model questions, indeed product design questions. And as such, it's important to understand the entire ecosystem and how the pieces fit together. And the second research aim is in some sense an extension of this. And it's based on this notion that in order to understand circularity, we need to understand the system, not just a single product, service, or for that matter, business model. So the second research aim relates to the ways in which the different stakeholders in this ecosystem create value on their own and together in the upcycling ecosystem, and what might be the organizational dynamics within and between the actors in this value chain. And then the third aim, Sveinung, is closer in some sense to the end user, or to the customer, and it's tied to this as a service model that you've already been hinting towards.
I mean, in the old days in Norway, we used to take build houses and what should you say? Montere, demontere. We put houses together and we took them apart and we could move them. That's like the old ways of doing it. And how can we do that again? Can we build houses in modules that can be built and used again for a new purpose? And can we then, for instance, turn these building materials into services and into some kind of leasing model? And how will the architects and how will the whole building industry, how will they react to that?
And there's a lot of work already done on these kinds of circular business models for the construction industry. Bucken and colleagues have been looking at examples of this. There's a research team at the Technical University in Delft that is looking into the facade as a service business model. So we're in some sense standing on the shoulders of many people who've done important work on this already. And our starting point for this third research aim is, what are the barriers and drivers among actors in the building industry for adopting these kinds of building materials, whatever they might be, but building materials as a service business model? So this in some sense ties the first question you asked, will your next office be an old oil rig, into the concrete business model that is possible to deliver that kind of solution. So we don't play favorites, but I would say, Sveinung, that this is perhaps the single research question that triggers us most in this research project.
It's kind of the value proposition then of Nordic Circles as well. If this is going to be possible, and then we need to solve this problem. And today this is not the way it's done. So there's work to be done here as well.
A lot of work. And like we said, this project is very much in its infancy, but thankfully we have a pilot ongoing already. And this is an example of a first pilot run by Nordic Circles right now. And this is an old ship, Sveinung, and it's going to become something completely different.
It's out here on the west coast of Norway. It's in a decommissioned facility, tearing it apart, shredding it up, reusing the materials in new ways. And here we are in the steering house of the house, and we're together with a company here. We're looking into how they can reuse this in a new innovative circular facility.
Yeah, that's very fitting. They're planning to build a circular innovation lab outside the city of Bergen, like an industrial symbiosis. And what could be more fitting for such a venture than to have an upcycled steering house as their headquarters for the circular innovation lab? So this is a project that we're now following, and we want to dig into also from a research perspective. We're looking for the research angle as this pilot progresses. So we've shared now, Sveinung, some of the plans for this very new and recent research project. We very much want to discuss with those of you in the business model community that are working on comparable kinds of projects and questions, as there are many research questions that are unanswered still in this project.
So if you have any questions, this is where to find us. So we'll be happy to, as Lars Jakob says, continue this dialogue with our colleagues all over the world. So thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.